So today we're going to talk about Fibonacci. And we're going to use the Fibonacci sequence as a way to think about dreaming. And full disclosure, I am not a mathematician. Algebra was a real struggle. And I was thrilled when I got into college that I didn't have to take any more math courses. So I'm not presenting this as a mathematical analysis. But what is Fibonacci? First of all, who was Fibonacci? This guy named Leonardo Fibonacci, and he was a 12th century mathematician. And he is the one that discovered what is sometimes called the golden ratio or the golden mean. Okay, what is that? Well, you take 1 and 1, that equals 2. You take 2 and you add the previous number, 1, and you get 3. And then you take 3 and add the previous number, you get 5. 5 and the previous number, you get 8, and then 13, and I believe it's 21, and so on and so on. It goes on forever, okay? And the ratio of those two numbers is 1 to 1.6, all right? And again, the 1.6 is like pi. You know, decimal places forever if you continue to divide it. Okay, so why was that so interesting, and why has it become so interesting, and why is it still used and actually used these days in some pretty extraordinarily avenues of exploration as it relates to energy and so on and so forth? Okay, first of all, we find the Fibonacci sequence all over the place. We find it in nature, in flowers, in the way petals of a flower rose has 5 petals. You can find Fibonacci sequences in pretty much any natural growth anywhere, okay? The other thing, and the thing that made it most useful right after the time or during the time that he was living, was the construction of cathedrals. Because when you go into a cathedral, the space is built on that ratio. The height of the doors are built on that ratio. And what another Leonardo discovered, Leonardo da Vinci, was that the ratio of 1 to 1.6 was also a ratio in what he would describe as the perfect human. So the distance from your wrist to your elbow is the 1, and the distance from your elbow to your shoulder is the 1.6. And you can see this ratio in virtually all of the Renaissance paintings when it comes to human beings. All right. So let's talk a little bit about discovery for a moment. I read recently that actually there's a documentary on, I think it's Netflix, about this tomb that was recently found. I believe it's a place called Saqqara in Egypt. And then subsequently, there was just a news story about a week and a half ago where they had found dozens and dozens of these intact coffins. Okay, they discovered them. Well, they were already there, right? So what happened was they found something that was already there. That's what Fibonacci did. He found this ratio that already existed. We can also find that ratio, by the way, when we look at the spinning galaxy that we are in and the 5 points of that spinning galaxy. Ratios all over the place. What's interesting about it, what is a ratio? It's a relationship between one thing and another, right? Okay. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that we take that metaphor and we take the idea of discovery. That is to say, we find out something that already exists that we had ignored. And I'll digress for a minute. If you go with a bunch of tourists into some cathedral in Italy, and you ask them, gee, how does this space feel? Well, for those who are believers, it feels like a holy space. For those who might not even be believers, it feels good. It's there's the proportion is correct. Okay. And that feeling could lead to a discovery. And I would suggest that's really where discovery comes from, this intuitive sense. But you could also ignore it. A person could say, it's a big room. I don't know, right? So our free will allows us to ignore the discovery that is right there, that has existed. I'm going to suggest to you that this idea of the dream world and the waking world, first of all, it's overly generalized, because the dream world, aspects of the dream world and the waking world permeate each other all the time. But just for the sake of this discussion, we'll use the idea of when your eyes are open and you're walking around versus when you're asleep. Now, the ratio of that time is usually 2 to 1. You're awake more than you are asleep. And regrettably, sometimes that's 3 to 1 and worse, which is a whole other problem. But the way in which you are informed is a ratio, I would suggest, of 1 to 1.6, the 1 being the time that you are awake and the 1.6 the time that you are asleep. Why? Well, there's a phrase that I use a lot called stepping into the next larger version of yourself. And the way you get into the next larger version of yourself, one of the most profound and all-encompassing ways is to pay attention to your dreams. Because what your dreams are doing are constantly nudging you toward what? The one, you, the center of that spiral. If you go on the internet and you look up, Fibonacci, and you look for images, you're going to get that conch shell, right? With the spiral. Your dream world is guiding you actually towards the center of that spiral. And what happens? As you go through your life, you accumulate experience and information. And Lord knows now you accumulate more information than has ever been available to human beings ever in the history of human beings, right? Tremendous amount of input. But what's happening? You are constantly in the process of resolving down to the essence of who you are, which is the profound nature of the human experience. Who am I? And so, for example, this video, if you've never heard of the Fibonacci sequence before and you want to go explore that, good Lord, you could spend the rest of your life on it. And it would be fascinating and really interesting. And it would inform you in a way that would also lead you to a further expansion of an understanding of who you are. So dreams are an avenue, and in my experience, the most direct avenue to that process. Okay. There's another thing that's important about this. On the desk behind me, you see a bunch of notebooks, right? Well, that's about 14 years worth of dreams. Now, I was writing my dreams down for years before, but they don't exist anymore in terms of the media that I wrote them down in. But I went back this morning and I read the first dream that I had in 2007. And it was a time of deep despair in my life. It was a time when I could make nothing work. I was virtually penniless, and this was after holding some very senior positions in the corporate world. And I went out and I thought, okay, I'm going to start paying attention to my dreams. And I bought a notebook. This is the dream I had. I'm escaping from the mafia through the basement of a house. The basement is actually 3 concentric circles of concrete. As I get to the 3rd circle, I escape through a gap in the wall. Then I have a team of 3 people, the 3rd of which is the 4th of a team that used to be the 4th team of 4 against me. So I told myself again, I have 3, the 3rd of which was the 4th of a team in opposition. And there are 3 teams of 4 whose 4th is a 3rd team on my 3rd. Everything is changing and expanding around me, but these teams stay the same. All right, now that might be a little difficult to follow. And I'll be honest with you, when I had it and wrote it down, I didn't know what the heck it meant. I kept going back to it and reading it and didn't understand it. This was before I spent 5 years studying tarot. Now in tarot, what's 3? The Empress. What's 4? The Emperor. We could say the difference between the feminine and the masculine. We could say that the difference between the matriarchy and the patriarchy. So there are many metaphors in that dream, and if you didn't totally follow it, don't worry about it. It's my dream anyway. But in reading it now, what I began to understand was I had immersed myself in the 4s. I had immersed myself in the construction of literally buildings and in the construction of a patriarchal value system. And that what became apparent was that the ratio was wrong. That in the dream, there's 2 3s, and then the third is a 4 from the other team. Now, I'm going to digress a little further. Richard Tarnas has this idea, which I think is absolutely brilliant. He was talking about the masculine and the feminine. And he basically said, I think probably we need to refine this a little bit, because we get stuck when we say masculine and feminine with men and women. It's just difficult to get around. So an idea is that there is a masculine version of femininity and a masculine version of masculinity, and the same thing on the other side. There's a feminine version of masculinity and there's a feminine version of feminine energy. And when I say feminine, what I really mean femininity, I really mean feminine energy. These are energetic states, but they have a particular quality. My vehicle is masculine. That's what I am. And my feminine nature, which I can best describe in the moment that I held my son after he was born, is a different feminine quality than when his mother held him. So that dream to me was basically saying I had the ratio wrong. I needed to incorporate more of what we call feminine energy. What's feminine energy? And I'm going to circle back here, I promise. So there's this idea in the West, certainly in my lifetime, that is narrowed down to a sense of value that can only be defined by money. That's it. All we have is financial value in any corporation. And I will tell you, as somebody who tried without really knowing it, it's almost impossible to inject other values into a corporate structure, even if there are a bunch of well-meaning people, because at the end of the day, it's how much money you make. This dream occurred when I was done with that process, when it became important to me, and again, this is an awareness that came over time, to incorporate other values to help people understand that what they think and this abstraction that we call, value based on finance is in the wrong ratio to what's actually valuable. And that's what the Fibonacci sequence and the golden mean helps us understand as a metaphor, that there is a ratio, and the ratio has one value that's greater than the other value. And that value that's greater than the other value is one that cannot be fully defined. You cannot get that ratio down to a whole number ever, right? But it is a journey. It is a process in life to understand that. And that, I think, is what we're faced with right now. I think that's why, at a very sort of high, non-mathematical, because that's who you're talking to, use of it as a metaphor, we've got the ratio wrong. Your dreams, if you pay attention to them, just like if you knew what the golden mean was when you walked into that cathedral, if you understand it and you allow it, it will inform you. So there are many metaphors in the natural world. There are many, many metaphors in the mathematical world that all speak to this, idea that there is a natural relationship that we need to get back to quickly. So I'm going to say 2 things to you now. First of all, and I mentioned this in some of the videos, but I need to be very direct with you. If you are having dreams and you don't know what to do with them and you're not sure what that's all about, get on my calendar. There's going to be a link in the description below. You can get on my schedule. I don't do, quote, free or complimentary consultations. The reason I don't charge for consultations is because it's a conversation between you and I, to see if this makes any sense, to see if this is of any use to you, to see if this is a place in your life where working with your dreams is going to inform you, okay? That's for real, and I'm going to encourage you more directly than usual to do it. Second thing is that I'd like to get this channel to the place where we can get a community page. So if you're not a subscriber, it would be great to just subscribe. That'll help me out. And hopefully these videos coming to your inbox will help you too. So listen, take care of yourselves. I think, as we all do, that there is light at the end of the tunnel on this virus. And I also think we could look at this experience as a metaphor for what's to come. That a lot of what we had thought worked in a particular way doesn't. And that can be scary, but it's also an amazing opportunity. So take care of yourselves. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others. I'll talk to you soon.